Good evening. So thankful that you're able to be here tonight. It's a blessing that we can be together in the middle part of the week to open up the Scriptures. If you haven't already done so, you might be turning to Hosea in the Old Testament, the book of Hosea. We're in chapter 13 this evening. Hosea 13. We'll try to cover verses 1 through 16. I'm sure that you will agree with me that Brother John Burnett has been doing a fantastic job in presenting our lessons week by week as we've been going through this minor prophet. We really appreciate his presentations week by week, and we want to thank him and express to him our gratitude. Tonight we're in chapter 13. So, Hosea he's the prophet of God. Throughout Hosea's address, throughout the book of Hosea, Hosea is the mouthpiece of God. God has a message for his people Israel. They needed to sit up and listen. They needed to make some changes in their lives. But unfortunately, they were an obstinate people. They were people that, sometimes Scripture calls a certain individual stiff-necked. They were stubborn. They were hard-headed. They refused to turn from their ways. And so here in chapter 13, Hosea continues his summary. We looked earlier in chapter 11 and 12, and Hosea has given a summary of certain things, and here in chapter 13 he continues his summary by recounting the charges on which Israel is being indicted. The chapter here in 13 parallels a lot that we saw earlier in the first 4 chapters of the book. Though here in chapter 13, things that are stated are more brief and with greater force. As Hosea makes the indictment against Israel, in every instance, in every case, Israel's sin is depicted as ungrateful abuse of the good things that God has given them. So God had been good to Israel. God had blessed them in so many ways. And yet they had forgotten God. They had forgotten Him. And how tragic it was that they had forgotten Him and had turned to idolatry. They began to blend the teaching and the belief of God with pagan belief, pagan practices. This chapter is a further elaboration of the gross sins of Israel. And this evening as we study together, we're going to be looking at some things here. So we'll jump into chapter 13, verse 1. We need to, obviously, as we go through this reading, through chapter 13 and the book of Hosea for that matter, we need to take notice of the lessons that are being taught. We live in a different time period. We live under a different covenant. But there are certain principles concerning God that are overreaching, regardless of what covenant people live under. God does not wink at sin. God does not wink at idolatry. God is a jealous God, and He desires and deserves our full allegiance. In verse 1 and 2, we'll begin here in chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. Tonight, overall, chapter 13, we're dealing with blessings and curses. Blessings and curses. And so, again, God has blessed Israel, and these blessings are going to become a curse to Israel because of their inappropriate use of what God had given them and blessed them with. So we begin in verse 1. When Ephraim spoke, there was trembling. He was exalted in Israel, but he incurred guilt through Baal and died. And now they sin more and more. and make for themselves metal images, idols skillfully made of their silver, all of them the work of craftsmen. It is said of them, those who offer human sacrifice kiss calves. So we'll pause here for just a moment and talk about Ephraim for just a moment. Ephraim representing the northern kingdom of Israel, or Samaria. And so Ephraim, over a long period of time in Israel's history, even before the divided kingdom, Ephraim was larger and tried to ascend to power. And we see that, first of all, as we think back to Genesis chapter 40, verse 14. I'm not going to, for the sake of time, I'm not going to turn there just now, but you recall that Ephraim was the son of Joseph, born in Egypt. And when Jacob, we also know as Isaac, gave the blessing, he gave the greater blessing to Ephraim rather than the firstborn son Manasseh. And Joseph tried to correct Jacob in this regard, but he said, I know what I'm doing. And he gave the prominent blessing to Ephraim. And so Joshua, the successor to Moses, who led the conquest of Canaan, was of the tribe of Ephraim. You recall in 1 Kings chapter 12, at that time when Solomon has passed and Rehoboam is taking the reins of leadership over the United Kingdom at that particular point in time, and there became a great division. Rehoboam, you recall, he listened to the counsel of the younger men rather than the wisdom of the older men. And he determined that he was going to inflict greater hardship upon the people than even his father David had. And so Ephraim, under the leadership of Jeroboam, led the rebellion that resulted ultimately in the divided kingdom, 1 Kings chapter 12 and verse 20. So Ephraim had always been prominent and powerful among the 12 tribes, being the largest and the strongest, and at the same time the most ambitious among them. And so, we think of this expression about the trembling at the something being spoken by Ephraim. Think about what is recorded in Isaiah 7 verse 2. Isaiah 7 2, it was told the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim, and his heart was moved, and the heart of his people, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. So you see the imagery there, how unsettling this was for Ephraim to join links with Syria on that occasion. So there were certain things that were spoken by the rulers of Ephraim, and as they were heard, it brought trembling and fear within the heart of other tribes within the northern kingdom, and also sometimes even among those of Judah. As we look further in verse 2, well, actually with reference to verse 1, the latter part of that, he offended in Baal, he died. And now they sin more and more. They have made them molten images of their silver and idols according to their own understanding. All of it the work of the craftsmen. They say of them, let the men that sacrifice kiss the calves. So the problem that God had with the northern kingdom was under the leadership of Jeroboam, idolatry was introduced into their worship. 1 Kings chapter 16, 1 Kings 16 verse 30, Ahab establishes Baal worship in Samaria. Ahab established Baal worship in Samaria. 1 Kings 16:30, Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. And as it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, he took for his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went to serve Baal and worshipped him. He erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. And Ahab made an Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. So we see that Jeroboam, he introduced in 1 Kings 12, 25 and following, he built the altars, the calves in Dan and Bethel. That's 1 Kings 12, 25 and following. We might go there for just a moment. So there was a couple different issues going on with the introduction of Baal worship and the worship of calves, bull calves. 1 Kings 12, 25, Jeroboam built Shechem and Mount Ephraim and dwelt therein, and went out from thence and built Peniel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, Now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto the Lord, even to Rehoboam king of Judah. And they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam king of Judah. So the king took counsel, and made 2 calves of gold, and said to them, It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold, thy gods, O Israel, which brought me up out of the land of Egypt. He set the one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. And this thing became a sin for the people. Became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. So the people were encouraged by the kings of Israel to engage in idolatry, to worship, remember the instructions that God had given his people back in Exodus chapter 20, that they were to have no other gods, no gods before him, that is, before his face. It didn't mean that they could, as long as God, the Lord Jehovah, Yahweh, was the prominent one, that it was okay to have lesser gods. That was not what God was saying at all. He was saying, before me, before my face, I am the only God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. And so, because of the introduction of idolatry and Baal worship and the worship of the calves, it began the spiritual decline of God's people. As we see in verse 1 described concerning Ephraim, he was exalted, but he died. And we see in verse 2 that we're reminded that sin promulgates sin. Sin produces more and more. And the people engaged in sin, engaged in the sensual activities associated with the pagan Canaanite gods, they engaged in evil. And God was sorely displeased with them because of some of their practices, because of the practices associated with Baal. And so in verse 2, he says they make these images of their silver. So they have these things that they made in order they could use them both in their private and public devotions. And they made them according to their own ingenuity, their own devices. And there's a different rendering here, depending on if you're using the English Standard or the King James, as to whether or not there was actually human sacrifice being involved here. We know that at times there was children put in the fire, sent through the fire to Moloch. So it's a possibility that such is under consideration here. There was a reference earlier, and I didn't record it, but there's a reference earlier in Hosea concerning the shedding of blood and how it was just more and more. So God's people were acting in ways where behavior was very distressing to God and evil, as they were influenced by the pagan people around them. In the latter part of verse 2, there's this expression about kissing calves. It was quite amazing that people of understanding would take an image, a golden calf, and kiss the lips of the calf. So this was something that was outrageous. It was something that was just totally ignorant. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 18, 1 Kings 19, verse 18, yet, God here is speaking, yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. So you recall back in the day, in 1 Kings 19, Elijah was distressed, and he thought that he was the only prophet that was being true and loyal to God. And so God pointed out that there were 7,000 that had not kissed Baal with their mouths. And you might recall, even recently, we had a lesson on worship, the devil worship, and the definition of that to kiss the hand toward. So, try to fast forward through some notes here. I won't spend all the time, a couple verses. So, when God's covenant people forgot Him and wallowed in essential immoralities of the old Canaanite paganism, their spiritual death ensued immediately, and the ultimate destruction of the kingdom became inevitable. Move on to verse 3, where Hosea will use some word images, some descriptions, some similes to describe Israel's pending demise. In verse 3, therefore they shall be as the morning cloud, and as the early dew that passeth away, as the chaff that is driven with a whirlwind out of the floor, and as the smoke out of the chimney. So as you think about these descriptions, these similes, they are comparisons or likenesses to Israel's impending doom or end. So you think about the sun and how terribly hot it would be in the morning, very early. The sun would come out, and the morning clouds and the dew would dissipate. They would go away very rapidly. Think about the chaff on the threshing floor. This was something that would be done on high elevation, where a place where there was a strong wind that would pass, and so the chaff would be separated. That part that was of no value, and so the wind would take the chaff away. It would just spread it into oblivion. And so much like smoke as well. Think about smoke in a chimney. Of course, in these days and times, it would go out of a side window. But for our intents and purposes today, we use chimneys. And so when that smoke comes out of the house, out of the chimney, it just, that vapor, it dissipates and it's gone. It's no longer visible. So Hosea is showing what is going to occur to Israel. They're going to be thrown into the wind. They're going to be carried into captivity by Assyria. They're going to be spread over a large period, a large area, and they will never reformulate as a nation ever again. This expression was used earlier in chapter 6 and verse 4, where God asks, "What shall I do with you, O Ephraim? What shall I do with you, O Judah? Your love is like a morning cloud, like the dew that goes early away." So the point that God was making to Israel back in that text was that his people were quite fickle. They were on again, off again. James, in his letter, James 4, verse 14, uses similar imagery concerning our lives. Verse 14 of James 4, "Whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow, or what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time, then vanisheth away." So Israel would soon, very rapidly, find or experience its end. Move on to the next range of verses 4 through 6, give emphasis to God's goodness, and in spite of His goodness, Israel's forgetfulness of all that God had done for them. In verse 4, "Yet I am the Lord, thy God, from the land of Egypt. And thou shalt know no God but me, for there is no Savior beside me. I did know thee in the wilderness, in the land of great drought. According to their pasture, so were they filled. They were filled, and their heart was exalted. Therefore have they forgotten me. So God takes their mind back to the time of deliverance, when they were in Egyptian bondage for more than 400 years. And you recall how that they were dealt with there in those days. They cried out for mercy. They cried out for God's help. God heard them. And God showed his power with the 10 plagues. He showed Israel, and he showed Pharaoh and Egypt who is God. They had their false gods, of course, but it was because of God that they were delivered. They were able to escape. They were able to go through the Red Sea. They were able to go into the wilderness, where God provided for them, where God provided for their food, for He provided for their bread, their meat. He cared for them. He loved them. He protected them. He gave them shelter. There is no God but me, no Savior beside me. So this expression, verse 5, I didn't know thee in the wilderness, expresses his great care, his love for his people. I'm not sure, you recall back in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, chapter 8, and even later, where Moses speaks to the people and he warns them. God speaking through Moses. He warns them about days to come when things are going well for them in the land of Canaan. He told them, when you're becoming very wealthy, when you're blessed, beware lest your heart is lifted up and you forget me. And there were certain curses associated with punishment, associated with the covenant, if they should turn their back on the Lord God and worship idols. And they turned a deaf ear to Moses' warnings. And so we see here in these readings that God has been good to them, God has cared for them, God has provided for them, and yet they forgot Him. They had the mindset that they had empowered and enriched themselves, and they just were very proud and lifted up. And because of that, God was sorely displeased. We'll move on to 9 through 11. 7 through 8, it should say. Is that right? 7 through 8. So, God was Israel's helper. We've been seen in the preceding verses where, and we're reminded how that God provided for Israel. Israel was helped by God. Verse 7, therefore I will be unto them as a lion, as a leopard by the way will I observe them. I will meet them as a bear that is bereaved of her whelps, and will rend the caul of their heart, and there will I devour them like a lion. The wild beast shall tear them. So that's 7 through 8. So because of their rejection of their helper is going to become her destroyer. Verses 9 through 11. O Israel, thou hast destroyed thyself, but in me is thine help. I will be thy king. Where is any other that may save thee in all thy cities? And thy judges, of whom thou sayest, give me a king and princes. I gave thee a king in mine anger, and took him away in my wrath. So, God is pointing out to Israel that they are to blame for their own demise. He says, you have destroyed yourselves. you and I have a choice like Israel did. In Matthew chapter 7, Jesus talks about the broad way and the narrow way. The broad way, of course, leads to destruction, and the narrow path leads to life eternal. Jesus says, "Few there be that find it." But you and I have a choice day by day as to whether to travel with the majority of people who are walking in darkness, to walk the broad way that goes to destruction. You and I are lost. You and I find torment as our destination. It is our own fault. It's not God's fault. Because God has given us, He's been good to us. He's given us His Word. He's given us guidance. Just like the rich man in that exchange with Abraham, when he was wanting Lazarus to go and to give witness and testimony to his 5 brethren so they wouldn't come to the place. He said, they have Moses and prophets. And so you and I have been given not only Moses and prophets, but we've been given the message of the Lord. We've been given the message of the apostles, the writings of New Testament writers who direct our paths in the narrow path that leads to heaven above. And so it's not God destroying us so much as our destroying ourselves when we choose the broad path. Israel was choosing the broad path. They were choosing the path of darkness, the path of sensuality, the path of paganism. So because of their choices, they would reap what they had sown. In verse 10, where now is your king to save you in all your cities? Where are all your rulers? Those of whom you said, give me a king and a prince. To recall back in the days of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 8, 4 through 9, that Israel kept on demanding a king. They demanded a king of Samuel. And in 1 Samuel 8, 4 through 9, God spoke with Samuel and told them to listen to the voices, but warn them, tell them about the results, what's going to be the effect of having the king. He says that they rejected you, Samuel, they rejected me from ruling over them. And so, of course, the warning came true concerning what all would occur as a result of having a king like the nations around them. We see that Saul was rejected by God in 1 Samuel chapter 15 through 22 through 23 because of his rebellion. He listened to the people rather than God. God told him to destroy all the Amalekites. And King Saul chose rather to keep certain animals alive, and also the king, King Agag. And so because of Saul's pride and his rebellion, God rejected him from being king over Israel. So we see here in our text that verse 11, I gave thee a king in mine anger and took him away in my wrath. So maybe they thought that their kings would be able to deliver them in their time of trouble. But they're going to be taken away. They too are going to be destroyed. Their kings are not going to be able to save them. It doesn't matter who they align themselves with. They can align themselves, they can make some kind of covenant with Assyria. But it will not keep them from being destroyed. Hosea 8 verse 4 earlier, they made kings, but not through me. They set up princes, but I knew it not. With their silver and gold, they had made idols for their own destruction. So they had used the wealth, they had used the silver and the gold. You might recall that back in the days of Solomon was the king, that the nation became very, very wealthy. And it was said that the silver was as prominent, it was as plentiful as the stones on the ground. And so here we see Israel using the wealth that God had given her for improper uses, using their silver and gold to make idols. Hosea 8, verse 4. Next we'll look at verse 12 through 14. 12 through 14. The iniquity of Ephraim is bound up. His sin is hid. The sorrows of the travailing woman shall come upon him. He is an unwise son, for he should not stay long in the place of the breaking forth of children. I will ransom them from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. O death, I will be thy plagues. O grave, I will be thy destruction. Repentance shall be hid from mine eyes. So here we see the imagery of a birth. And perhaps here Hosea has in mind the need for a rebirth or a new birth, much like what Jesus described in talking to Nicodemus in John chapter 3 concerning entering into the kingdom of heaven, that a man must be born again. Here is a man, Ephraim, the nation of Israel, Ephraim being described as an unwise child, refusing to be born, refusing to enter the canal in order that it might be born, which of course would lead to the death of the child. So, of course, this is what is going to occur to Ephraim. This is what is going to occur to Samaria, or the northern kingdom, the northern tribes of Israel. Verse 14, there's a quotation, or there's something here that is actually used with Paul to the Corinthian, in the Corinthian letter, 1 Corinthians 15, concerning death and the grave. And so here, well, first of all, there in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul uses it from the Septuagint, uses it there in a positive sense, thinking about the return of Jesus and the pending resurrection, victory that we will experience with the return of Jesus based upon his resurrection. But here, Hosea has a different point in mind, suggested that that death and Sheol are being encouraged to open up and to receive, to do their damage, to do their wound to the nation of Israel. Sheol sometimes is used with reference to death itself. Sometimes it is used with reference to the punishment, the demise of those who enter therein because of their impotence. So there was punishment, certainly awaiting death and punishment, destruction, devastation, awaiting God's people Israel. And God, He would not show compassion. Verse 14 in the English Standard Version, O Sheol, where is your sting? Compassion is hidden from my eyes. So God is a good God. God is a compassionate God. But his compassion and his deliverance is conditional. It's not unconditional. Finally, verses 15 through 16. Israel would be cursed by death and captivity. Though he may flourish among his brothers, the east the wind of the Lord shall come, rising from the wilderness, and his fountain shall dry up. His spring shall be parched. It shall strip his treasury of every precious thing. Samaria shall bear her guilt, because she has rebelled against her God. They shall fall by the sword. Their little ones shall be dashed in pieces, and their pregnant women ripped open. So we see here that concerning Ephraim has been prominent among the tribes. They have been blessed. They have entered into the land of Canaan. The land of Canaan was a land described to Abraham as a land that would flow with milk and honey. And as Joshua led Israel into the land, certainly it was a land that flowed with milk and honey. It was that so described by the 12 spies that went into the land of Canaan for those 40 days and investigated and searched out the land. They came back with this good report. It is truly a land that flows with milk and honey. It was a land of plenty. It was a land where the people that came in and they were able to graze, as it were, like sheep. They were filled to the full. They were blessed. But here he describes God's judgment being brought upon them by an east wind. The wind of the Lord shall come, rising from the wilderness. And of course here, this wind being used figuratively to refer to the Assyrian Empire that would come, that would sweep in and would utterly consume and destroy the nation of Israel. So the east wind would come, and his fountain shall dry up, his spring shall be parched, it shall strip his treasury of every precious thing. Samaria shall bear her guilt. So Samaria is guilty. Samaria, Israel cannot, her guilt is going to stay with her because she's rebelled against God. And then there's descriptions here concerning the death. There will not even be the mother to survive to mourn her lost son or daughter. So here in verse 16, of course, there's some graphic expressions concerning the utter destruction of the women, children, unborn children, because of their rebellion, because of their sin against God. We need to remember that God, in today's world, some people can only think of God as being good and a God of grace. And truly, God is good. God is a God of grace, a God of mercy. A God who is willing to forgive. He's very long-suffering. But we need to see from Hosea the balanced view of God. That God, on the one hand, is good. He is merciful. But all of that, we cannot just turn our backs upon Him and go into idolatry and live like the world and have His favor. Romans 11:22. Romans 11:22 says, "Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of God. On them which fell, severity, but toward thee, goodness, if thou continue in His goodness." If is conditional. If thou continue in His goodness. Israel did not continue in God's goodness. They turned to evil. Back to Romans 11:22, "If thou continue in His goodness, otherwise thou also shalt be cut off." You and I should not be proud, arrogant, high-minded, and think that it can't happen to me. It can't happen to us. It can. It can happen to me. It can happen to us. Remember Jesus speaking to the 7 churches of Asia Minor in Revelation 2 and 3. Remember the warnings Jesus gave? That under certain circumstances, if they did not repent, if they did not shape up, that He would remove their candlestick. And they would receive the reward. Back in Deuteronomy 30, verse 15, for this moment. Deuteronomy 30, verse 15. Here's Moses. "See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you today, by loving the Lord your God, by walking in his ways, and by keeping his commandments and his statutes and his rules, then you shall live and multiply. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you're entering to take possession of it. But if your heart turns away, and you will not hear, but are drawn away to worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall surely perish. You shall not live long in the land that you're going over the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore, choose life, that you and your offspring may live, loving the Lord your God, obey his voice, and holding fast in him, for he is your life and length of days, that you may dwell in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to give them. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we come before your throne. Thank you, Father, for all that you do for us. Father, help us never to forget you. Help us never to be ungrateful. Father, help us to always give our all to you. You deserve our best. May we be fully devoted to your cause. May we love you with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Father, may we love our neighbor as we love ourselves to your glory.